Okay, so I wasn't sure whether to have a shir tonight or not because of the bank holiday, which is probably where everybody is. And in America, I think it's also, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's also an off day. I think it's Memorial Day. Is that right? So, but I couldn't hold back because we're really in the middle. And if people aren't able to be here in person to listen to the recording, but we shouldn't lose the flow. So with Hashem's help, we're going to carry on with our learning. And I hope everybody had an incredible Lag BaOmer. And now, obviously, we're preparing for Shavuos, for the great wedding. We're going to be speaking about, as we've been speaking about for the past couple of weeks, that relationship with Hashem that we have that's in the way of a real, as it were, a romantic bond. Yoim Chasunasai, say Chazal. Yoim Chasunasai. A reference in the pasuk to a wedding day. Say Chazal, Zumat in Torah. This is the giving of the Torah. It's like a wedding. It's like a wedding between this particular nation and the creator of the world, who is wedded to this nation to spread a message to all nations. Right? And we have this special relationship. We have this special bond, this special connection. So let's jump back in. I believe we did Ois Beis last time. So if you turn over the page and you look in the left column, you'll see on the top of the page the letter Gimel, and we're going to start from there. And he says like this, some of the most beautiful words in the chapter that we've learned thus far, and that's a high standard because he said very many beautiful things. But listen to the way that he describes, again, these shining moments of walking into that realm, to that atmosphere, to that connection with Hashem that's called hisbodedus, personal prayer. Says the Heilige of Kluger Shlita, he says the following: B'chol meshech hachayim, throughout the course of one's life, take if kish Yehudi nizkar be'esh shebahu magia la Hashem yisbarach lehisyachid ima ve'ein ish. The minute, immediately after a person recognizes, in the moment that he magia, that he reaches la Hashem yisbarach, that he walks into that space, lehisyachid ima ve'ein ish, to be alone with Hashem in such a way where there's no other person present. It's just literally you, the individual, myself, the individual, with Hashem. Zar la yavi b'saydam, in such a way that there's no one else is coming into that setting. B'yayisai az b'dargas yichidi ba'olam, when he is in such a way considered yichidi ba'olam, the only one in the world. There's no one else but that individual. I think we spoke about it last week, right? About seeing ourselves as yichidim, right? To be individuals, and as much as we exist within a society. I can't remember if I was saying that here in one of my Hasmo classes, I can't remember. But to be a yichid, a yachid, yichidi ba'olam. I think Chazal, if I'm not mistaken, Darshan, they comment on the words in the Megillah that refer to Mordechai as Mordechai HaYehudi. I think Chazal say Mordechai HaYechidi. He was Yechidi. I believe it's a Gemara Megillah. He was a Yachid. He was alone. Like it says about Abraham, the same thing. Echad Haya Avraham. Abraham was one. Was a singular figure. And that's the DNA that we have inside of ourselves. So it's not as if we approach HaKadosh Baruch Hu all the time as a spark of this collective whole of the Jewish nation. Sometimes, and that's exactly what hisbodedus is all about, milashon boded, that's the shoresh, that's the root of this Hebrew word, hisbodedus, means to be alone. Means to be in that moment, you're the only Jew in the world. You're all that there is. You just show up, and like we said, and I believe I shared the quote from Rabbi Nachman and Rashi on a pasuk, I believe it somewhere in Devarim, has a very similar lashon. It says, if God sets aside all the other things he was, so to speak, busy with, and to speak in human terms, obviously Hashem is infinite, he can handle everything at once infinitely, it's beyond us. But in a way, Hashem sets everything aside, and he focuses on that one yachid, that one particular soul. We have Hashem's direct attention. I like to use the metaphor of a spotlight. We're standing in Hashem's spotlight. That's it. It's just you and Hashem. So let's look back inside. Bihi yoisai az b'dargas, when the Jew is approaching Hashem on the level of yichidi ba'olam, where we're the only person that Hashem has on this planet. On this little, I think they call it the pale blue dot, as was seen from I think one of the farthest images that was ever taken from planet Earth. One of the Voyager space vessels that was heading to Jupiter or something like that. So at one point it turned around and took a picture of the Earth, and it's just this pale blue. You couldn't even see any green. It's just this pale blue dot. And if you zoom in a little bit further, so you start to see continents and countries and states. And then all there is on this pale blue dot, amidst an unspeakably, unimaginably vast universe, is just this one Yachid. And not only that, we'll add, not only is there just this one individual, there's only this one moment. That's it. That's it. That's it. Because everything else is a mirage. The whole thing is an illusion, just for the purpose of giving the human being the capacity to choose in a way that we wouldn't have had otherwise if we were remaining spiritual beings, souls in the upper realms. The whole point of this whole human experience, or the physical experience, the materialist experience that our souls are having in this world, is just for this. Can we find it within ourselves to look beyond the illusion and to connect beyond the veil of all the things by which we're surrounded, to find the presence beyond them, to find the personality, so to speak, or the capital P, the persona, the being, the presence, the creator behind them. And so in this moment, there's no one else. There is no other moment, past, present, future. It's all one. Yechidi ba'olam. We're in God's spotlight. B'yosa rega nasaloi toiv alalev. So in that moment, when a Jew recognizes this, you walk in to the forest, you walk into the field, you walk into a private room somewhere, you go up on a roof of a house, which is probably less safe than roofs of buildings, which I mentioned last week, but you find yourself a safe, private place. And you remember that right now, there may as well be nothing else going on in the world. It's you and him. It's you coming face to face with all there is, literally all there is, everything that is, all of which is a slight little tiny, minute, infinitely minute in a certain sense, manifestation of the divine. We stand facing it, panim el panim. So if you remember that, nasa le'toyev alalev, so that's a good feeling. That's a good feeling, where you don't have to clamor for Hashem's attention and jump up and down and wave your hand. The second that you enter that space, you're all there is in God's vision. Hine, and it emerges for that Jew in that moment that hine yesh le b'chayim pina v'sha'a. This person has in his or her life a pina, a little corner, v'sha, and a set time. Sheba, that in that corner and in that time, yesh misha machshav oisoi l'malam and akol. There's someone, and in this case not just anyone, but someone with a capital S. The someone, the one, the echad, yachid umiyuchad, all that there actually is. There's someone, shemachshav oisoi, that values this person, lemala min hakol, more than anything else that exists. More than anything else that exists. All there is this person. Bishvil Yisrael shenikru ureshis, bishvili nivra olam. Which can also be read bishvil yid, as a common colloquial way that we refer to the Jew. Bishvil yid, nivra olam, just for this one person. Yesh mi shemachshav oisoi l'malam min hakol. There's someone who values you more than anything else in the universe. It's crazy to think this way, but in these moments, that's what we should be feeling. It's a wild thing. Did we ever feel that way about ourselves? Did we ever feel even a tiny little glimmer of this about ourselves? Most people haven't. And in this moment, that being is making out of you l'nesich malchus asher ba yispar, into this incredible, like a crown jewel, asher ba yispar, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu treasures, that He takes pride in. Now, mishum sheb'shas hayichud HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Because in this moment of yichud, in this moment of intimacy, of unity with Hashem, mekabel libe argasha pnimis, we feel in this moment this inner feeling. Hashem yisbarach magbiyoi umaroi mamoi umachshavai ketachlus hayitzira. That Hashem is lifting this person up. Umaroi mamoi, elevating this person. Umachshavai, and considering this person ketachlus hayitzira, like the pinnacle of creation. The person hasn't begun to speak. They haven't begun to say all the poetic things that they might have hoped or have planned or either be capable or incapable of saying. Nothing. No hasagas, no grand perceptions of Hashem, and we haven't been able to produce any words that would express what we ought to be feeling in that moment. Nothing happened yet. You just showed up. Right, we're pre the stage of talking. We haven't gotten into what we're going to say, how we're going to say it, in what stages we're going to say it. Haven't started to speak about that yet. The person just shows up in the space with the knowledge, elazacha, that this person has merited b'shas tzavsei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That this person has merited to have in his or her life a time set aside where it's just them and Hashem. Them and Hashem. Nice rhyme. Them and Hashem. That's it. The person knows that there's a period of time in my life which is outside the context of tefillah, which can become very rote, because it's just the same liturgy again and again. Hopefully we can work on our prayer and we can invest it with deeper meaning, etc. But it's the most human thing there is. It's the most real thing there is. In the same way that you would relate to another person, you come to Hashem on the most human level, on the most real level, the way that you show up in the rest of your life. You show up in these shining moments with the echad yachad umiyuchad, and a person knows, I've set aside time in my life. Our incredibly frenetic and complicated and confusing and bewildering and fragmented lives in the modern age, it's crazy what we have to put up with. And we're so blessed by the same technology by which we are so cursed. It's the same thing. This is the nature of our time. So we have so much, but at the same time we have so little. We have so much quantitatively, we have so little qualitatively. And it's so difficult to be alive and to deal with life and all the pressures and all the anxieties and all the bulbulim, right? But there's something so simple about setting time aside to approach Hashem with openness, and this is I would say this is the most important element, directness, where it's just real, the most real. There's such a joy in that, because in that moment you cut through all the complexity. You don't have to be a big scholar, you don't have to be a big philosopher, you don't even have to be particularly frum. If a person's not holding in all the other areas, a person takes 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, half hour, an hour if you could. It's a very long time, an hour. Especially today, we're jumping from thing to thing to thing to thing. An hour is became much longer. But a person sets time aside. And you approach Hashem yashar, directly. With nothing convoluted, just really showing up as you already are. One thing is certain, is that if we can have doubts about the validity and the value of all other areas of our service, of our avodas Hashem, of our mitzvah observance, do we do it properly? Do we know all the Hilchas Shabbos? Do we know all the laws, of this holiday or that chag or whatever it is? Or am I, let's say for the men, am I learning enough? Am I davening with enough kavanah and so on? This is, you can't fail at this, because you already succeeded because you showed up. And that's very important to keep in mind, that even though we're going to be learning now in this sefer, the quote-unquote, the right way to do hisbodedus, and the order, and the different levels, and what we should be feeling and thinking, chas v'shalom, heaven forbid, should we turn this itself into a dogmatic pressure, where this is what we have to be feeling, and this is how we ought to be saying it, because that undermines the whole purpose of it. The whole purpose is that it has to be spontaneous. What Rav Kluger is doing is he's giving us somewhat of a map that can sort of enable us to walk in with greater clarity in terms of, okay, what should I even expect in this space? But to dictate to us step by step what we should be saying and doing, that's defeating the purpose. The whole point is that a person shows up as they are, saying what they're feeling in that moment and feeling what they need to be feeling in that moment. And in this context, there's going to be time for all of that. Rav Kluger is saying that this is the universal launch pad. This is the universal starting point. You are wanted, you are beloved to Hashem, you have His undivided attention, and you're literally fulfilling the purpose not only of your life in these moments, maybe in the most intense way possible. You are fulfilling the purpose of all of creation. Not just in this moment, but for all of history, that it literally would have been worth bringing the whole entire being into creation. With a perfect degree of concealment that it avails the human being to confront in all of its different aspects of the natural world and the laws of physics and history and science and everything else evolving the way that it's evolved over these however thousands or millions or billions of years, depending on what you happen to believe. It would have been worth all of that for this one moment of the human being shaking off the dust of the mundanity of life, of the confusion of life, and bursting through the surface like a torpedo into the realm of the most stark and perfect clarity. That behind the veil is an infinite presence begging to be recognized. Like we spoke last week, begging to be recognized. And is there any greater form of recognition than to show up, again, not as a great scholar and not as a great pious person who's meditating on a mountaintop, but as as you are, with all of your regular human contours, your personality, your koach hadibur, your ability to speak, or let's say our inability to speak, our kvad peh, like Moshe Rabbeinu, or our stuttering words, where we don't always have the right thing to say. Maybe we don't have anything to say at all, which is going to be a stage of hisbodedus, or a kind of hisbodedus we're going to address, because Rabbi Nachman addresses it. But a person shows up, and he comes in that moment, or she comes, panim el panim, face to face with Hashem. In that moment, that's the most precious thing there is. Kagoin shabar rak, let's go back inside. A person shows up in that space only kedei lias biyachad v'sulai. Even if we had no words, and even if we had no grand concept, a person doesn't have anything to say. A person just takes 5 minutes off from the rush of life and takes a bit of a walk. Not even just to clear our mind, because that would be good enough. If we could shut off our phone for a couple of minutes and spend some time with ourselves, halavai, that's already a madriga. But more than that, to take 5 minutes, take a walk around the corner. Like we say, take a walk to the park or to whatever. Find a place where a person can be alone. And we journey from being alone to being together with the alone with a capital A. Right? To be alone together with Hashem. Like we said last week. So even if we don't say any words, mikol makayim atzav sahazot, just this togetherness. Itoi, together with Hashem, imai, along with Hashem, etzloi, next to Hashem, just to hang out, just to be in His presence. For a person zocha to have a really close friend, sometimes you don't have to say words. Sometimes just to be together with that person. I'm not sure if I mentioned it in this context. But there's a children's book. Did I mention this already in this year? There's a children's book, and it's about this boy. It's a very, very beautifully done book. We have it at home. It's about a boy who builds this huge tower out of blocks, wooden blocks. It's a mamash magnificent tower. He builds a huge structure, And it's illustrated in the book. Obviously, it's a metaphor. I don't think there were actual crows flying in his living room, but there are these huge black birds, ravens, crows. And they come down, they fly down in a whole swarm, and they knock down his tower. He's beside himself. You can imagine, a kid builds a tower, it's his whole world. There's nothing else but this tower. And now it's destroyed. And the story tells how one by one, all of his stuffed animals come to address what's happened. And each one, it fits their personality. The stuffed animal, the bear, comes along, and he tells him, what a terrible thing. Let's roar about it. Let's scream about it. And the bear starts roaring, and the kid is just, he doesn't feel like roaring. And so the bear just gives up and he goes away. The snake comes and slithers along, the evil, wicked serpent snake, and he whispers into his ear, let's knock down someone else's tower. Right? That's the snake. And maybe the elephant comes and says, let's cry about it, and he starts trumpeting, blowing his nose, his trunk. But each of the animals with their own personality comes to try and address what's happened. And he's just sitting there. He's so broken. He's ignoring them all. And then the rabbit comes, the bunny. The bunny rabbit hops over, very soft and cuddly, his long floppy ears. And the chiddush, the novelty of what the bunny does, or rather doesn't do, is that the rabbit doesn't say a word. The rabbit just comes and gets closer and closer and nestles up, against him and just sits there. It just sits there, doesn't say anything. And they sit there together. And after he feels warm enough, not just physically, after he feels inside seen enough, held enough, he starts to go through his grieving process. And he roars about it, and he cries about it, and he thinks about breaking someone else's tower, and he goes through all the feelings that he's feeling, because, and this is the title of the book, it's called The Rabbit Listened. The rabbit didn't say anything, had no advice. The rabbit listened. Highly recommended to get this book if anybody's blessed to have children at home, because this is an incredibly important lesson. And sometimes children's books, they're books for the kids, but they're really books for the parents. Because maybe it's a cute story, I don't know how much parents will, the children will get or they won't get. But the parents should understand that sometimes it's not about giving the kid advice. So the kid is not looking for advice. But the child, more often than not, is looking to be seen. To be seen and given an opportunity to be heard. And the rabbit listened. So the way Rav Kluger is describing this is a person walks into the Daled Amos, into that space of the Rishus HaYachid, of the private property of the divine. The Jew walks into Hashem's spotlight, where there's no one else in the world but you. There's nothing else in the world but you. There's no moment but this moment, not in the past and not in the future. This is it. In as much as anything is real, this is real. It is the pinnacle of reality. The cutting through of all the fog and the cutting through of all the illusion of the created world with all of its noise. It's a moment of absolute clarity, earth-shattering clarity. The Jew walks into that spotlight. What we should be feeling in that moment is Hashem just being there. Let's read Rav Kluger's words again. Kegoin sheba rak kedei liyos biyachad. Just to be together with him. V'sulai. Nothing else, maybe. Mikol makam hatzav sahazois. This connection, itoi, imoi, ve'etzlei yisbarach. Just the fact that this is what's going on. How many people are busy jogging in the park, and God bless them. It's a wonderful thing to look after our bodies. Halavai that I should also do that at some point. It's on my list. So people are jogging, or families are spending time. All these are wonderful things. And maybe there are even people who are so sensitive to the fleeting nature of life that they've found it within their hearts to walk and spend some time with themselves. All of this is wonderful. But to be among those, I would say few, it's an overstatement, less than few. Less than few human beings, heartbreaks to say, less than few Jews who are walking in this particular park for a fundamentally different purpose, which is to converse with the divine. It's a whole different walk through the park. It's a whole different thing. It's a completely different category. Because we don't show up in the park relating to anything having to do with this worldliness. We walk into this space to see past the mirage, to see past the illusion, to spend time with the infinite, to spend time with all there is. So when a Jew has this feeling, even before any words were said, and whether it was a successful hisbodedus session or not, there's no such thing as a failed there's no such thing, because there's no requirement. It just is. It's already the greatest success. How much it says about us, how much it says about our emunah, how much it says about our sensitivity, how much it says about everything. So garmalai, it should cause for that person ni'imus ein l'sha'er. Can't think of a better terminology to use. Ni'imus. Know what the translation? What does ni'imus mean? Pleasantness or sweetness. Ni'imus bli or ein l'sha'er. An unimaginable pleasantness. Asher ein dugmasa ve'ein sheni la b'chaim. There is nothing in life that should parallel this. Because you know what pleases us in life? What really pleases us, not just like brief moments of happiness or pleasure or whatever it is. Those could be nice, especially if they're had in the context of important things. But what pleases a person, what gives a person nachas, really nachas, in the same way that we talk about nachas from children, Be'ezer Hashem, all of us should be able to experience that at the right time, b'siyata d'shmaya, in all of our circumstances, to have nachas from our children. What does it mean, nachas? When does a person have nachas from their children? If a person's child is happy, it's wonderful. It's not necessarily nachas per se. Nachas is when the parent is able to feel that the child is plugged into reality, is plugged into something real. In whatever area it is, the child is maximizing their neshama in the way that their neshama was meant to be maximized. That's nachas. And for some parents, that means a kid is really good at Gemara, and that's nachas. For some parents who have a little bit of a broader framework for what success looks like, and understand that a Kodesh Baruch Hu needs much more than people to have a lot of like Talmudic wisdom, which is also obviously a part of it for the boy specifically. Hashem needs conscious Jews. So if a child has a particular talent for art or for music, and that child is channeling their capacity, but in a holy way, in a real way, in a way that's actually plugged in to what they say in, I think it's French, the raison d'être, the reason, the premise for which that particular soul came down into the world, and the parent feels like, wow, this is it. Like the child is doing what he or she came to this world to do. That's generally what we mean when we say nachas. When we have the broadest possible perspective of what life means and the meaning thereof. So when we look at children and we see that they're doing that, unbelievable nachas. Unbelievable nachas. And again, for each parent, that will mean something else. And I want to point out here, for all those parents, and there are many, who have children who, at least according to the standard framework, so to speak, societally, that these children wouldn't be assumed, chas v'shalom, to be giving their parents nachas. So of course HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees everything in a relative framework. And every kid can give nachas to their parents and to themselves, which we're getting back to in a minute, about our own nachas, about ourselves, we're going to see in a minute, in relation to what they're struggling with. And I happen to know a number of these families, and I happen to know a number of these children. And sometimes, if the parents are conscious enough, and Baruch Hashem, this is happening more and more and more with incredible organizations like Kesher Nafshi. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Kesher Nafshi or Avi Fishoff. This whole approach, it's a paradigm shift in the way that we think about quote unquote struggling or chas v'shalom rebellious youth, hurting souls in pain. Sometimes to conscious parents of these precious children, these children give them the most nachas from anyone else. Because somehow, paradoxically, it can become clear to these parents that these children might be plugged in to what their neshama had to accomplish in this world in a greater way than the child that everything is easy for. Even if it doesn't look that way on the surface, because everything is relative. I had a conversation, now it was 2 weeks ago, one of the local schools, I'm not going to give too much information, with a boy, and we were speaking about substance abuse of a certain kind, certain substance that the boys are all using. You could probably fill in the blank and sort of surmise what that is. And we were having a very open conversation about it, and they wanted to know what my thoughts were, and I shared them. And then after I finished sharing them, so I went around the group, it was a small little group, and I asked them what their feelings were about it. It was a totally non-judgmental conversation. We're just sort of talking about something that all of them struggle with, that isn't really being addressed in the regular standard school session. So we had this open forum. And what I did basically was I went around and I asked them, what's your take on your current usage? And is there an ideal that you want to strive for? And if so, why? And if they would have said that they're comfortable with where they're at, that's fine. I'm not, no judgment. Just to get the conversation. So one of them tells me, he says, I use pretty frequently. And I'm like sort of, he tells me I'm sort of okay with the level of usage. Like it's not, he doesn't perceive it to be over the top, and he's still functioning. He doesn't feel it's addictive and so on. But he says just because of the way that my school week is structured, the only time that I can really smoke is on Shabbos. And he says to me, and I really don't like to smoke on Shabbos. I wouldn't. He says I really like. If there's one thing I could change, it's that. And I'm sitting there and I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, I'm about to go and keep Shabbos, and the same way that I kept Shabbos last week, the same way that I'll keep Shabbos the next week, and it's easy for me. I don't really think about it very much. It's something I look forward to and I enjoy, and my Shabbos is a Shabbos. But I'm thinking to myself that if I was God, Kiviyachal, I was Hashem who needed nothing, who created the world to give, and who needs, so to speak, through the structure of the world that he created, simply to be recognized by those who are yearning to recognize him consciously with all of their struggles and challenges and difficulties. I thought to myself, how much potentially more precious is it, HaKadosh Baruch Hu? This boy, who doesn't have any societal pressures, clearly not connected, in any overt way, but who feels in his Jewish neshama for one reason or another, maybe he can't even explain it, just the honesty of that moment, the simplicity of that moment, the sweetness of that moment. I really want to keep Shabbos. I want that. Do I want that? I do it. We do it. But this boy, given his struggles, has the capacity to consciously want it, and he'll have it, Be'ezus Hashem. And like I remind the parents, when he has it at exactly the right time, not a moment before and not a moment afterwards, precisely when his neshama is ready, he'll have it in a way that maybe the parents never had it in their life. And if the parents are plugged in to what a parent ought to feel in terms of nachas, sometimes it's these children that can provide the most nachas, because it's clear that their neshamas are on a journey, and that whatever they're able to do, whatever they're able to sacrifice, other stories are coming to mind. Boy, who didn't want to work on Shabbos, despite not keeping Shabbos, but working on Shabbos he couldn't do. And he turned down a good job. Somebody I know turned down a good job. There's a boy who was not keeping Shabbos. But a Jew doesn't work on Shabbos. I'll never get to make that sacrifice. You'll never get, most of us will never get to make that sacrifice. So everything is relative. But that's nachas. That's nachas. When it's not about what the neighbor thinks, and it's not about what society thinks, and it's not about what our expectations were. It's about what HaKadosh Baruch Hu needs out of this soul, not yesterday and not tomorrow, and if only things had been different and we should go back now and redo his whole childhood. No. In this moment, because everything that happened in the life of this particular child was to bring them to this moment. And if in this moment, in this circumstance, ideally, of course, halavai, we daven and parents cry, and they ought to. And we ought to do all the shtadlus possible to help people along, that they should mamish rediscover how important it is for their neshama to do mitzvahs and to be eating in the way that the Torah wants, and to be keeping Shabbos in the way that the Torah wants. Obviously, that's our ideal. But if the circumstances have aligned in such a way where this is what the child is up to, and this is where they're at, the nachas ruach that they could bring Hashem, from what Rabbi Nachman describes as the smallest, tiniest movement, the tiniest inflection. Down here in this world, says the Rebbe, if you take two lines and you draw them starting from the ground, and you draw them up, and they're almost exactly parallel, but just a tiniest little bit of a difference from the bottom, where it's like there's almost no distinction between them. You can imagine two lines with, what do they call a protractor? Is that thing that you can draw lines with? No? What's that thing? It's something else. Huh? A compass. What's a protractor? Something else. Anyway, those are my school days. Anyway, so one of those things that you can draw straight lines with, and you deviate them in the tiniest bit on the bottom, and then you draw them outward and outward and outward, says the Rebbe. In a few miles, these lines will be literally miles and miles and miles apart. Says Rabbi Nachman, we're down here, so we don't see the impact of little things. But says the Rebbe, we need to believe that the tiniest movement, particularly for people who are pulling against so much trauma and so much pain and so much ignorance and so much sadness and so much distortion and unhealthy ways of thinking, etc., all the things that these children are struggling with, and much more that we're not even mentioning now. The tiniest little motion, tiniest. In Shemayim, in the upper realms, we can't imagine. We can't imagine what a shift our neshamas are making when, chas v'shalom, not us, but when this particular Jew who doesn't keep Shabbos says, I want to stop smoking weed. Not because I have a problem with the weed per se, but because I really want to keep Shabbos. I don't want to smoke on Shabbos. So what do? He kept Shabbos? I don't know if he kept that Shabbos afterwards. Maybe not, maybe yeah, maybe not. But you know what he accomplished in expressing that desire? He moved a centimeter. And that means that in the heavenly realms, his neshama just soared over the Grand Canyon. It just took an intergalactic journey. Nachas from children. So now turn around and speak about ourselves. What does it mean to have nachas from ourselves? What does it mean for our neshama to really feel good, the way that it wants to feel? Not by stuffing our face, metaphorically, with whatever else we think we're lacking in that moment. That's not going to do it. You know that, I know that, we all know that. Hence my need to jog, like I said. We all know this already, one day. We all know this. That's not it. The neshama wants to have nachas from itself, meaning it wants to know that it is doing what it came to this world to do, because nothing short of that will give us what's called sipuk hanefesh. Nothing else will give us fulfillment. Ein adam meis v'chatzi tavasa biyadeh. We'll be busy chasing our tail the whole entire life. We'll never get there. Because what we're looking for is not here. What we're looking for is the beyond that we can access through our experience of here. See, he says, the ni'imos, the pleasantness that our soul ought to feel in these moments of hisbodedus, of yichidi ba'olam, standing in the spotlight of Hashem with the rabbit kiviyachol, who listened, just to feel together, even before you said anything, but to know that you're not alone. And not only aren't you alone, if there was no one else in the world, the whole world would be still revolving on its axis for you. For this moment, this experience, let's go back inside. He should feel garmalai, the person should feel ni'imos ein l'sha'er, an incredibly inconceivable degree of ni'imos, of nachas, of pleasantness, asher ein dugmasa ve'ein sheni la b'chayim, that nothing else that we do ought to give us as much nachas as this, because like I mentioned before, all of the other aspects are necessary for all the Kabbalistic tikkunim and all the very deep spiritual rectifications that are taking place when a Jew taka keeps Shabbos, and a Jew is shaking lulav and lighting the Shabbos candles and hilchas, chalamayid and everything else, everything in between. Now, all those things are necessary. But those things are fraught with all kinds of spiritual challenge. They're fraught with the sense that we haven't merited to really fulfill our obligation properly. They're fraught with, maybe even more frequently, they're fraught with the probability of engaging with these things by rote, without consciousness, especially tefillah, which Rabbi Nachman likens to a highway, which all the robbers, all the highway robbers, the highway thieves, they know where that road is, because it's the public thoroughfare, and so they're waiting there, and that's like tefillah, like Shemona Esrei. The Sitra Achra, the Yetzer Hara knows Shemona Esrei. He knows where that highway runs. He knows, the thoroughfare between the bracha of Alam al-Shinam and Allah Tzadikim. He's there. He's waiting. But hisbodedus, Rabbi Nachman says, is just you paving your own little path with like a hatchet through the thick woods, through the forest. You're finding your own way. It's more challenging because you don't have the text in front of you, so it's more challenging. You're making your own way. Sometimes you won't have the words, like I said. Sometimes we'll stutter. Sometimes we'll be at a loss. But one thing is certain, is that the Satan doesn't know where that path is. It's something brand new. It's a brand new way. And so in more common terms, what that really means is that whereas on the highway of tefillah, or the highway of mitzvah observance, or the highway of limanat Torah, or the highway of Yiddishkeit, very turbulent and dangerous. And so therefore, we're not quite sure whether our nachas should be complete. Let's not forget about ulterior motives, which especially for the men is such a specter, is such a shadow cast over all of the different avoda that a person is doing in a public setting. A person's davening in a minyan. Rabbi Nachman has a lashon where he says, for the men, whoever's going to watch this, that if a person is what's called nitzrich lebrios, or a person feels that a part of their consciousness is busy thinking what the person next to them is thinking of their davening, of their shakaling, and how, whatever it is, he says better to daven b'yichidus. Hard to know, because davening in a minyan is so important. But he says that if we're the kind of people that we're not really davening, we're just sort of putting on a show, says the Rebbe, so just don't do it. But when a person is learning Torah, Gemara, in the context of a curriculum. It's so difficult for it to remain God conscious because it becomes about the tests, and it becomes about the social status, and it becomes about how much we know, and it becomes about how much, very frequently, how much we don't know, chas v'shalom, for many of the kids, and that it comes with its own social stigma with all of its issues. But aside from that, let's say a person's succeeding, but it's fraught with challenge. Because who knows? Who knows whether we're learning in the way that Torah ought to be learned? Who knows whether we're davening in the way that tefillah ought to be davened? Who knows if we're keeping Shabbos the way Shabbos was meant to be kept? But when a person walks out to the field for hisbodedus, where no one knows that you went, and no one's going to know that you did it, we're not broadcasting this, no one's going to give you a shining sticker like they give the kids for davening in grade school. No, you're not going to get any pat on the back, nothing, no recognition, nothing, no certificate, your professional mitboded, nothing. It's just you. It's just your 5-10 minutes with the rabbit that listened. It's just you with the presence of Hashem. In the most authentic way, in the most vulnerable way. Otherwise, why are you doing it, right? In the most real way. A true expression of emunah. So a person should feel that ni'imus, that nachas ein l'shayr, that unimaginable nachas, asher ein dugmasav ein sheni la b'chayim, to which there is nothing that comes even close in life. Because I know in that moment at least that this is why I came to the world. And there's other things to do. There's Torah to learn, and there's tefillas, regular prayers to daven, and there are mitzvahs to do. But in this moment, I know that I'm doing it right. It's just me and you, Ribbon Shalom. And I'm going to open myself up to you in the deepest way. And I'll sense you opening yourself up to me, kiviyachol, in kind. And he says, so great is this whispered sweetness, this silent sweetness, that any moment, the rest of your day, that you remember that you had 5 moments with God today. No matter what else it is that you're doing. Misnachim, the Jew, will be comforted. I'm not alone. I'm not alone in this world. I have yet merited to guard, to keep that moment of closeness with the Yachid, with the only one, Hamevin Lelibai, who really understands me, who's really there for me. If only Adam and Chava would have learned Sefer Yichud HaHisbodedus right after they did the Chet. If only, you know why? Because then they wouldn't have had to run away. Where were they running? Where were they running? Where were they running? That Hashem has to call after them, Ayeka, where'd you go? Where did you go? If you don't mind passing me at the end of that table, you'll see a book. If you don't mind passing that up to me, just for a minute. Thank you so much. So this over here is one of the first 2 copies of my brand new Sefer. It's called From My Heart to Yours. And it's a collection of different writings, eclectic writings on different topics. It will be available for order by Ezras Hashem in the next 2 or 3 weeks. And it just popped into my mind just to share something with you from the musings section, which is basically a collection of smaller, shorter writings of various wavelength. And so there's one over here, I'm going to try to find it here, which is called Ayeka. Understanding the call of Ayeka. And I wrote over here, ever since the charge of Ayeka thundered through the Garden of Eden, reinforcing the great fear and existential anxiety of Adam and Chava, it has become ingrained in the very makeup of the human experience to run away and hide from God. We shy away from opportunities to get to know Him a bit better. We try to avoid overly spiritual events that demand us to face His presence. The thundering voice of Ayeka, where are you? echoes still in the dark and vast forests of the tortured soul. The guilt gives way to paralyzing fear, the fear to vast emptiness, and emptiness to utter despair. But did it ever occur to us that the call of Ayeka embodies not wrathful revenge and a thirst for retribution? Like, Ayeka, where are you? I'm gonna smoke you out, hunt you down. But simply the pained surprise of a father who wants nothing more than to ask his precious children why they felt the need to run away from him in the first place. Where did Adam and Chava get this idea that God is meant to be escaped from? This itself is part of the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra. This itself is part of the intellectualizing framework where we forget about the cheshek that we spoke about that goes beyond our intellect. We forget about, more accurately, the Eitz HaChaim, the tree of life, about which the pasuk says, "Va'atem hadvekim Hashem Elokeichem chayim kulchem hayom." The tree of life is the tree of devekos. It's the tree of connection. Hashem is our Father. Hashem is not a policeman. Hashem is not running after us. If only He would have known this, Adam and Chava wouldn't have hid. They would have ran kiviyachol away from Hashem, as the Pele Yoetz very poetically writes, to Hashem. Because where else should a person run? Even when we're running away, we run toward HaKadosh Baruch Hu to take refuge in His presence. And this is what Reb Shlomo Carlebach teaches very beautifully, that as a result of Adam and Chava eating from the Eitz Hadas, what was one of the curses for Chava? What was one of the repercussions, the consequences? That she should have a difficult childbirth, right? It's going to be difficult for her to have children. Says Reb Shlomo, what that really means is Hashem is telling Chava, if you don't understand that a parent is not meant to be run away from, but a parent is meant to be the one human in the world, the one presence in the world that a child is always able to run to. If your conception of the nachas of a parent, so to speak, is only when it's on the parent's terms, and that anything else, the relationship becomes severed, chas v'shalom, and it's conditional, so the kid has to feel like they need to run away and hide. Hashem says to Chava, if you feel that you need to run away from me, then I'm sorry to say it's going to be difficult for you to bring children into the world. It's going to be difficult for you to be a mother. Because there's a direct correlation to the challenge of being a parent and the warped perception of our Father in heaven being someone, so to speak, that we cannot share our whole selves with, that we feel the need to hide away from. And you find this to be the case in to one degree or another, and I can't remember who said this or where I heard this from, but I think there's truth to it, that in correlation to the degree to which, in particular communities, that's the conception of Hashem, that Hashem is this mean, terrible tyrant who's standing there with a whip, and whenever He asks Ayeka, it's because He wants to find us and beat us, chas v'shalom, and then we have to feel guilty and shameful and run away from and hide away from and fool ourselves and fool Him and fool others, etc. Chas v'shalom, to the degree that that's the prevailing perception of the divine, that's what children of those parents feel about their parents. And it might even be unconscious. That's the energy that they get, because that's our concept of Hashem. So naturally our children are going to feel that way, not just about Hashem, that obviously, but even to the parents. They're going to feel like they want to hide away from those parents. They're going to feel shame. They're not going to feel like they could share themselves with those parents, because that's the parent's perception of what the ultimate parent is. Hashem says to Chava, you're going to run away from me. How are you going to bring up children? A parent is not someone from whom the child should run away. A parent is the last person in the world where, when everyone else is gone, the parent is there as an ever-abiding presence, forever and ever and ever. Misnachem bazeh, that the Jew takes comfort in this, she'ein levad ba'ilamai, that I'm not alone in the world. Ba'id shamar lo regal shel kirva, and he has yet merited to guard this precious moment in my yachid hamevin lelibai, with the only one that really understands us. V'hamashal hazeh mitabas nisuin, and he says the parable for this, and we'll close in a few minutes. The parable is the wedding ring. Hamuneches etzlo tamid, that is on the finger of the kala at all times. Lahaskir lakol yemei chaya, to remind her at every moment of life in the most unwedding-like circumstances. Even in the context of that very relationship where there's a disagreement, there's an argument, there are hurt feelings, there's a misunderstanding. The kala feels alone. She feels misunderstood. The husband feels abandoned. To remind the kala kol yemei chaya shebe'etzem, that in her essential status, shebe'etzem, that essentially harehi kala, she is a bride. She is wedded, no matter what, no matter what, no matter what. That no matter what, this is an existential fact. She shares her soul with the other. And no matter how many things seem to be getting in the way on the surface, underlying, underneath, I think we mentioned in a previous year, that 1 foot in whatever argument is being had, chas v'shalom, 1 foot still under the chuppah. Ve'erastich li la'olam. Remain engaged to me, says Hashem, to each and every Jew, forever, forever, la'olam, forever, no matter what. Don't run away. If you feel the need to run away, run to, don't run away. Run to the only one. Run to me, says Hashem. Afki loy tamid hi eis chuppah, she's not always under the chuppah. Ach metzias kiddushin noiseres l'kol hayamim, but that status of kiddushin, of being set aside in this way, no matter where the person walks in life, no matter what she's involved with, no matter who she's spending time with, no matter where, no matter what. There's a way in which it's just her and her husband. Asur la'akula alma kehektish, as the Gemara in Kiddushin says. Why is it called Kiddushin? Right, the marriage process, called the act of sanctification, is because in that setting, he, more specifically she, is set aside from the rest of the world, kehektish. She has no one else but him. And in the modern parlance, he has no one else but her. Like hektish, which is asur, it's only be eaten by the Kohanim. So even though she's hanging out with other people, and even though she is in whatever circumstance in life, she's at the office, she's driving Rhoda, she's etc., 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 whatever other roles she has, there's an existential part of her soul that is always in lockstep with his. And this is the mashal of Asa Hashem. And maybe the wedding ring is this capacity to open up our mouths without any text and without any fancy ideas and without any pre-planned discourses and soliloquies and any fancy poetry, and just to say, hi, I'm here. I'm a human in Olam Hazeh, I'm in this world. But I know that I have a neshama, that's the real me. There's a lot of noise having to do with the body and with the world of dualism and the world of fragmentation and complexity and conflict and concealment. It's true. But my soul still recognizes that it's all a bit of an illusion, and I'm, at least in this moment, I'm seeing right through it, and I'm here to spend some time with you. no matter what else the Jew experiences the rest of that day, the rest of that week, maybe if it's even once a month, the rest of the month, they can close their eyes and draw strength from that island of clarity, that island of stillness, that island of essential meaning, where we are already enough, and in that moment we are already engaged with the very experience, not only for which our soul came into the world, but for which the entire physical reality was constructed. And that moment, just going back, turning the page back, that moment has ein dugmasa. There's nothing even remotely similar to that moment. Ve'ein sheni la b'chayim. It is second to none in the moments of value in our lives, because it cuts to the core of the essence of the inside of the central kernel of essentiality. That is why we're here. Going back to the first year we gave, it's the ne'ilah. It's just all there is. What a privilege to have this secret of hisbodedus in our times. What a privilege. I trust that we've been trying to slowly but surely put it into practice. Halavai. Otherwise it's just a nice theoretical shiur, but the main thing is to try to do it, to really try to do it. And as we continue on the journey, we're going to learn much more. We're just getting started. Chapter 1, a lot to do, but I think we're off to a great start. Okay, are there any questions? Sorry, I can't take from the Zoom share, but anybody who's here in person. The question is how deep it was. The deeper the experience, the longer it lasts. But it won't last. No, it won't last. This world is very, 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 very convincing. It won't last. That's why we need, hopefully every day, at the very least every week. But we need it as often as possible. Some people, even very long periods of time every day. It has to be within balance, otherwise you can make yourself neurotic about this also. The whole point of hisbodedus, we should become less neurotic, not more. Right? So however much time a person needs, but let it be, the thing. Don't waste time. 5 minutes, 10 minutes should be a real experience of everything that we're talking about here put into practice. And the more that we review these teachings, the more that we absorb these teachings, the easier it will be to just shift into that mindset, into that mind space, to feel all these feelings that really we ought to be feeling all the time. But again, the world is very convincing, and we get very busy and very distracted. So, but also it's like a muscle, and the more time that it takes, the more experiences that we have, the stronger we get at it, and it becomes more natural, and it becomes more. No, the Yetzer Hara really. This is he doesn't. He really does. The Yetzer Hara is not to do it, but once you're there, how are you going to get distracted and start thinking about something else when you're speaking? I don't get distracted when I'm speaking to you. When I'm davening, I'll get distracted all the time. But when you're actually having a conversation about the actual things that you're going through, there's no rote. It's all fresh. It's all beautiful. It's experiential. Hopefully, if it's in a beautiful place of nature, it's itself healing, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful. The Yetzer Hara, you leave him behind. The Yetzer Hara is not to do it, but once you make the time to do it, you're free. Really free. Should be blessed to find the time to spend with Hashem. Be'ezras Hashem. Thank you so much to everybody who's joining. I see my esteemed mother was on the group as well. It's always wonderful to see you, Mommy. Thank you for being here.